6 things that happened after Jesus died. 1 is, there was a seismic tremor and earthquake. There was a reaction from creation taking after the passing of Jesus. We examined that the soil shook and the shake part. Nature itself was shaken by the passing of the child of God. Matthew states to begin with that the soil trembled and the shake part. This dialect suggests that this is a critical natural response to the divine occasions on the cross. Number 2, the tombs opened. Matthew at that point records an occurrence found in none of the other accounts. The tombs were opened, and numerous bodies of the holy people, God's individuals who had fallen snoozing in passing, were raised. After their restoration, they came out of the tombs, entered the heavenly city, Jerusalem, and showed up to numerous. Earthquakes can harm tombs as they were carved in stone. The restoration of the bodies can as it were be ascribed to the coordinate activity of God, inferring he is behind the seismic tremor. Given the topographical highlights of Palestine, which lies on a critical seismic plane, and seismic tremor would not be an abnormal occasion, but combined with rocks driving to the opening of tombs, it is another critical confirmation to Jesus' execution. Another seismic tremor will before long witness an indeed more noteworthy divine occasion, the revival of Jesus. Matthew's interesting record of these occasions emphasizes the triumph over passing that Jesus gave up on the cross fulfills. Those who were revived are truly portrayed as those who had fallen snoozing, a common modern confirmation informal for somebody who has kicked the bucket but whose interminable destiny is secure. Like the starting declaration, the extraordinary restoration of these saints' bodies and their appearances in Jerusalem is a striking witness to Jesus' work on the cross, and along these lines to his revival. The term sacred individuals likely alludes to devout figures from the ancient confirmation, heroes and saints of Israel's history, chosen to marvelously witness these occasions. Their appearance to individuals in Jerusalem is a declaration to the adequacy of Jesus' work on the cross. This expects Paul's educating approximately Jesus being the to begin with natural products of the dead. But presently, as things truly are, Christ without a doubt rose from the dead and got to be the first fruits. That is, the to begin with to be restored with a morally sound, undying body, expecting the restoration of those who have fallen sleeping in passing. For since passing came through a man, the revival of the dead too comes through a man. For as in Adam all pass on, so too in Christ all will be made lively, but each in his possessor range. Christ the firstfruits. At that point those who are Christ's at his coming will be restored with upright, godlike bodies. The revival of these holy people is a preface to the revival all devotees can see forward to. Through Jesus' passing an used day has come, a day when passing was vanquished by passing. The restoration to interminable life got to be conceivable. But note, it was not until after Jesus' restoration that the tenants of these tombs were raised and entered Jerusalem, where they showed up to numerous. The book of scriptures does not say whether these revived holy people kicked the bucket once more or went to paradise with the Master Jesus. The passing of the child of God shook nature itself. The prevalent minister Charles Spurgeon expressed that men's hearts did not react to the biting the dust Redeemer's agonizing cries, but the rocks reacted. The rocks were part. He did not pass on for the rocks. However, the rocks were more touchy than the hearts of men for whom he shed his blood. It is best caught on that Matthew aiming us to see that the seismic tremor happened on the day Jesus was killed, and at that point on the day he was uncovered as risen. The control of modern life was so solid that it brought back a few of the great individuals who had kicked the bucket. This is one of the most interesting sections in Matthew's Gospel. Matthew does not give us with much data, and we do not learn around this event from any other source. Number 3. The shroud of the sanctuary was torn in two. Matthew chapter 27 verses 50 to 51. And Jesus cried out once more with an uproarious and agonizing voice and deliberately surrendered his soul, sovereignly rejecting and discharging his soul from his body in accommodation to his Father's arrange. And at once the shroud of the sacred of holies in the sanctuary was torn in two from best to foot. The soil shook and the rocks part. The shade that secured the sanctuary was torn in two places. The shade was the as it were thing in the sanctuary that separated the sacrosanct zone from the most heavenly portion of the sanctuary. It was an exceptionally clear outline of the partition between God and man. Acts 6:7 says that in the days of the early church, numerous of the clerics were submissive to the confidence. Perhaps this torn cloak illustrated to them the enormity of Jesus' work. It is too likely how the torn shroud got to be common information. Jude 9:1-9 tells us that in the sanctuary, a shroud isolated the heavenly of holies, the natural put of God's nearness from the rest of the sanctuary where men stayed. Jude chapter 9 verses 1-3. without a doubt that to begin with pledge had directions for divine revere and for the natural asylum. A sacrosanct tent was set up. The external, or to begin with, area in which were the lampstand and the table with its sanctified bread. This is called the heavenly put. Behind the moment cloak was another sanctuary, the inward or moment area known as the Heavenly of Holies. The Book of Mass Migration instructs that this thick cloak was made of blue, purple, red fabric and turned cloth. Now Christ is our predominant tall cleric, and as devotees in his wrapped-up work, we share in his prevalent ministry. We can presently enter the sacred of holies through him. Jude chapter 10 verses 19 to 20 says, "We have certainty to enter the most heavenly put by the blood of Jesus, by an unused and living way opened for us through the cloak that is his body." As we see upon this scene, we see in picture of Jesus' substance being torn for us, fair as he was tearing the cloak for us. The book of Jude gives a brilliantly nitty-gritty clarification of the significant meaning related with the tearing of the cloak. The cloak that continuously hung in the sanctuary served as a consistent update that sin makes people unworthy of being in God's nearness. The truth that the sin advertising was displayed once a year, past the heap of other penances that were displayed every day, was a bare-faced outline of the reality that sin truly might not be gave penance for or annihilated by unimportant creature penances. Sense of what Jesus Christ did on the cross. The obstructions that utilized to petition God and individuals were annihilated, and presently we can approach God with certainty and strength. Subsequently, since we have an extraordinary tall cleric who has passed through the sky, Jesus, the child of God, let us hold solidly to our confession of confidence. For we do not have a tall cleric who is incapable to empathize with our shortcomings, but one who has been enticed in each way, fair as we are, yet he did not sin. Hence, let us approach the position of authority of beauty with certainty, so that we may get kindness and discover elegance to offer assistance us in our time of require. Jesus' body was torn, and so was the shroud, each implying that presently we can strongly approach God. We have a tall cleric managing over the wonderful courts to guarantee that the devotee has full get to. At the minute Christ kicked the bucket, the overwhelming woven shade isolating the two fundamental rooms of the sanctuary was torn by an undetectable hand from beak to foot. The passing of the child of God was too went with by enormous tremors in the characteristic world, as if there was a few kind of passionate association between the lifeless creation and the one who made it. Number 4. There was haziness over the entirety arrive. Matthew chapter 27 verse 45. Presently from the 6th hour, 12, there was obscurity over the whole arrive until the 9th hour. There was a thick obscurity over the entirety arrive. Presently the sacred text was satisfied. Amos 8, verse 9. And it might come to pass in that day, says the ruler God, that I will make the sun go down at 12 and obscure the soil in wide sunshine. Frequently Christ was inquired for a sign from paradise, and presently they had one, but such that it implied the visual impairment of their eyes. At this point in the evening, it would be 12, and the haziness would proceed until the 9th hour, which would be 3 o'clock. This extraordinary obscurity showed up when the sun was at its brightest, because the moon was full. It seemed not to have been made by an obscure, as it cannot intervene between the soil and the sun when it is full. God's quick mediation not as it were brought almost this haziness. Cosmic information was simple at the time. Phlegon moreover notices an seismic tremor, which adjusts his story closely with the sacrosanct record. The animal may not sully the mistake sometime recently its maker. In this manner, the sun pulled back its beam so as not to witness the acts of the evil. The obscurity happening at such a basic minute can cruel a few things. To begin with, haziness was related in relic with grieving. Haziness was too related with the passing of extraordinary men. Both Gentile and Jewish perusers seen get at the obscurity as an infinite sign going with the passing of a Lord. Moreover, haziness was a sign of God's judgment. The tombs were opened, and numerous bodies of the holy people, God's individuals who had fallen sleeping in passing, were raised, and coming out of the tombs after their restoration, they entered the sacred city Jerusalem and showed up to numerous. Matthew chapter 27 verses 52 to 53. Number 5. The warriors supervising the execution realized he was guiltless. Presently the centurion and those with him guarding Jesus saw the seismic tremor and the things that were happening, got to be appallingly panicked and filled with wonderment, said, "Really, this was the child of God." Matthew chapter 27 verses 53 to 54. It was the work of a centurion to guarantee the torturous killing was carried out accurately and without complications. He was by and large in charge of 100 officers at the time of her execution. He was a career warrior, whose strength and insights made a difference him rise through the positions. He would be a warrior of the most noteworthy range. He would require to be both cold and proficient to succeed in this position. This man had to take after the orders of his bosses. The scene at Jesus' execution was so momentous that indeed a solidified Roman centurion recognized that this was the child of God. This realization implied that Jesus was blameless of the wrongdoing for which he was on the cross. The centurion must have had a blend of feelings. He had fair realized that he had managed the execution of an guiltless man. These were not the whispered words of a frightened enlist or the trembling words of an effortlessly controlled recruit. They were the conclusions come to by a prepared experienced. A man who had observed endless men endure terrible closes and was capable for driving them to passing. This centurion was well mindful of the solid condemnation of the Jewish devout pioneers who put Jesus on the cross for obscenity. His commander-in-chief, Pontius Pilate, had maintained Jesus' condemnation for making this claim. But he rejects the condemnation and announces Jesus' claim. Why? Since the contentions in favor of Christ were overpowering, in spite of the fact that he without a doubt had managed numerous executions. This execution was diverse. What did he see? Different scenes from the occasions of Jesus' capture, trial, and execution combined into a compelling explanation. It might have been Jesus' reaction to the treachery he was constrained to persevere at the hands of his possessed compatriots through capture and trials. It might have been Jesus' reaction to the torment he endured at the hands of the centurion and his men. One may think of the respect with which Jesus reacted to the lynch swarm requesting his blood like a noiseless sheep sometime recently its butcher. The sacred text does not record any reaction from Jesus to the crowd's cries, but the chief clerics blended up the swarm to have him discharge Barabbas for them instead. Pilate replied once more, "At that point, what might I do with the one you call the Lord of the Jews?" They yelled back, "Kill him." But Pilate inquires, "Why? What fiendish has he done?" However, they yelled all the more, "Execute him." So Pilate, wishing to fulfill the swarm, discharged Barabbas for them, and after having Jesus whipped, given him over to his officers to be killed. His concern was for their absolution, not for his elude. Jesus' kindness towards the individuals who rejected him and the officers who killed him counting this centurion. His reaction, "Father, pardon them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke chapter 23 verses 34 to 39. "Father, pardon them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast parts, isolating his articles of clothing among themselves. And the individuals stood by, observing. But indeed the rulers jeered and taunted him, saying, "He spared others. Let him spare himself if he is the Christ, the Savior, the blessed of God, the chosen one." The officers moreover taunted him, coming up and advertising him vinegar unfeelingly and saying snidely, "If you are truly the Lord of the Jews, spare yourself." Now there was too an engraving over him, "This is the ruler of the Jews." One of the offenders who were hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Spare yourself and us," as they bet for Jesus' assets. Jesus' concern was for their pardoning, not his elude. What a capable articulation. Matthew chapter 27 verses 35 to 36. "And when they killed him, they separated his pieces of clothing among them by casting parts." At that point, sitting down there, they started to keep observe over him, to watch against any endeavor at protect. If all this did not persuade him, he saw something more, the reaction of creation. Clearly, the centurion was stunned to witness such a sensational occasion amid Christ's last hours, particularly since he had never seen anything like it some time recently. It had a nearly immense effect on him. The centurion saw, listened, and felt all the occasions of Christ's torturous killing and passing. As a result, he and his troops were significantly startled. Indeed, if the centurion and his bunch of officers had learned to bargain with fear, presently they were encountering unadulterated dread. It's this effective cross and the cherish illustrated there that moves hearts. Indeed, the solidified, battle-weary heart of a career trooper from passing to life. An ancient saying goes, "The ground is continuously level at the foot of the cross." It was so in the begin-with century, and it is still nowadays. The foot of the cross is where everybody, destitute and wealthy, finds level ground to bow and grasp the Christ who kicked the bucket for them. Truly, this is the child of God. We listen and accept the travel must not conclusion there. We ought to have an energy to know him more profoundly. May that same want burn in our hearts so we can truly know the one who cherished us and gave himself for us. One cannot offer assistance, but ponder how the experience with Jesus influenced the lives of the troopers. Did they gotten to be Christians? The platform commentary reports the convention that the centurion's title was Longinus and that he got to be a dedicated adherent of Jesus, lectured the gospel, and kicked the bucket as a saint. This is as it were convention. We do not know if this happened, but we do know that truth has a way of clinging to a person's heart. The cross of Jesus has the control to alter the person. The centurions began as a Roman officer directing a torturous killing, but finished the day recognizing that Jesus was the child of God. Jesus has as of now taken the activity in salvation. Christ passed on for you. Presently it's your turn. Jesus gave his life so that we might have ours back. He kicked the bucket as us, so we seem live as him. He not as it were satisfied his Father, but won us as a prize, as humanity's substitute. Jesus endured the withdrawal of communion from the Father. Appalling as this was, it satisfied God's great and cherishing range of recovery. There are others who consider this a myth or, at best, a religious story. These are all special occasions that consistently affirm to God's interesting acts in human history. They are uncommon, powerful declarations that affirm the truth of the gospel and the transformative reality of Christ's adore. Number 6. There was two movement of those who believe in Jesus. One was the movement of Peter and two was the movement of Paul. When Paul was converted, he sought to join the apostle, but Peter refused. He then formed his own movement, and the world today adopts most of his teachings. Thank you for being here, and may God favor you.